So I figured one of the first videos that I want to do is basically just a general business update. I haven't done this for a long time, basically since there was a preview of the studio when we first signed the lease about March, and then the business launch in August. So it's been, almost a year of full operation, but it's been over a year in terms of just the starting of the new studio. So I guess the first thing we should talk about is maybe a little comparison of what's happening now compared to what was happening a year or 2 years ago in the old studio in Sydney Road. So first thing first, the space is a lot bigger. So we used to have 8 wheels as our classroom, as our member space, and that was the one space that everyone was sharing, which means that when we're doing classes, members can't come in, and when there's members, we can't do classes. So technically it was the 24-hour studio, but there were time slots that people had to work around because of our classes. And it was necessary because we needed to balance both. Membership alone is not enough to sustain the business, and we need classes still just to do all the other stuff that we can. So basically, if we only do membership, the prices will have to be maybe 2 or 3 times as much just to be able to sustain it. So the classes, in a way, is kind of subsidizing the memberships. And in the old studio with the limited space, that was really difficult to do and finding the right balance. So that was kind of one of the main reasons we wanted to expand, is to have multiple working space that we can separate. So classes can happen at the same time as members coming in, and also casual studio access and everything. And I can tell you that after maybe just under a year of operation, I think that's worked really well. So basically now we don't have a limit on how many classes we can run other than how many we can sell, which is great. So it's much easier to scale the classes side of things, and members have a true 24/7 access. The only time that they can't come in is if there's like a power outage or if there's any like major stuff like that. But other than that, even public holidays when there's no staff, members can come in, so you can get the most out of it. You don't have to worry about, oh, I want to do a day of clay, but then they're going to run classes, and then it's not going to be an issue. So I think that's the main thing that set us apart, not just from the old studio, but also from other studios that are offering membership. So membership is something that wasn't around when we first started 1280, and that was the main reason why I started 1280, is because there was I wanted a community space. I want to just pay a monthly fee and just have access to all the equipment, storage, things like that. And I don't have to have a home studio. But there was nothing, at least in Melbourne, Australia. So that's why we started the business. And then that kind of grew to a point where now the industry shifted quite a bit. So like compared to when we first started business in about 2020, now membership is a lot more common in a lot of spaces that I've seen around us in Melbourne, in Sydney, in Australia in general. But for most studio, membership is kind of afterthought. So it'll be classes first and then membership, where initially when we did it, we wanted membership as our priority, and then classes is there to support the membership in terms of the financial side of things, which I'll get into a little bit later as well. And I think having the membership first approach, which now in the new space is a little bit different because we can do both. So what's happening is membership and classes are kind of parallel to each other. They don't actually interact that much. So in terms of the priority that we're pushing and focusing our resources and energy on, I would actually say they're equal, which is great because that means we're not prioritizing one over the other, which means no one's really losing out. And I think that's kind of the perfect scenario for us. So that vision of having the parallel kind of services running side by side, that's definitely worked. And I'm so grateful that we made the move because we hit the ceiling very early in the old space, and there was nothing I could do to expand that business using that location. So I think our old studio was about 200 meters square, which is decent size, but because it's split into 2 space, the back is more private studios and workshops and things, where now we've got about 420 meters square of space, not including the mezzanine that we put in and the office spaces. So we have a lot more flexibility. So we've got, for those who don't really know our new studio, we've got 4 separate workspace. So 3 studios are wheel throwing studios, and then 1 is a dedicated hand building studio. So which means if we only run 1 class at a time, so there's still 3 other space that will always be available to members, and that's how we can manage things the way that we do now. What else was the change? So one of the negative side of moving to the larger space like this is we used to be on the main street, and we basically have foot traffic constantly. So anytime we have classes, we just put a poster up on the window and it will just sell out pretty easily. There wasn't much advertising or marketing involved other than maybe a few Instagram posts here and there. But now, because we are basically in an industrial area with no foot traffic. There's a few residential houses around us, but nothing compared to a main street with cafes and restaurants and shops and things like that. So we have to work a lot harder this year, or like this current financial year, to really get our message, our brand, our presence out there. So we've been doing more events such as markets and $1 classes, which was a really successful campaign basically. So the intro classes are basically 2-hour class designed for people who have no experience. So it's more for them to try the wheel and see what they like, see if it's something that they enjoy. But we did 28 of them. And from there, we've got a whole bunch of people that signed up to our term class, which is an 8 weeks program. So that conversion's great. We had people that didn't know about us, and then they found out about the studio because of the $1 classes. So they refer other people. People shared on Instagram, social media, things like that. So it didn't actually cost us that much because I ran all the classes myself. So if we were hiring teachers to do those classes, yes, we would have lost a decent amount of money because there were so many classes. But because I did it myself, and at this stage, it doesn't really matter if I don't pay myself, because it's more important for the business to kind of snowball and grow and gain that momentum. So we did a few other things like street posters for the market, which attracted a lot of people. The first market we had a really great turnout. We also did a second market recently during the autumn season, and that was not as busy as the first one, but we also didn't advertise it as much. The weather wasn't as nice, and people have already been here once, so they don't feel as urgent to come here again for the market, which is totally fine. We still sold a decent amount of stuff. We had a little, because it was the weekend before Mother's Day, so we had a little workshop where people can come and paint their mugs to get it decorated. We fired it right away because they were bisqued already, and that got a decent amount of response as well. People came here just for that, so that worked really well. So the advertising is definitely tricky because we have to constantly be doing that. So that's also why building this filming space, content creation space, whatever you want to call it, was a little bit on the priority list, because I want to be able to do a lot more content creation for social media, for YouTube, because that's a good way for us to market ourselves. That's a good way for people to talk about us, to share our content. And we'll try to be as interesting, as educational as possible. Obviously, business update like this is really just for myself. I've been watching a lot of the old stuff, and I really like just seeing where we've been and where we're at now. The plan is we'll do more content where there's multiple people. So it'll be me and the teacher, or me with one of the members. They can teach me a few things. We can just have a chat, talk about clay, talk about background, talk about kind of creativity in general, kind of like almost like a podcast thing. But I think we'll do it while we're throwing, for example. So we'll have multiple wheels set up here so we can throw together, do demonstrations and all that stuff. But that's a more long-term thing where getting other people on board is going to be tricky. So I'm going to do a lot of the more solo stuff first, like tips and tricks and just quick content for YouTube Short, for Instagram Reels, things like that. What else has been going on? So I think it's a good idea to get into some numbers now, just to see how we've grown, not compared to the old studio, but like as a standalone. Basically, I'm treating this expansion as a new business. So a lot of the figures I'm quoting now, it's basically comparing the very start, which is 1st of August, and what we're doing now. So initially, when we launched 1st of August, we had a really good response from membership. I think we had 30 people signed up within the first month. A lot of them are still with us now. And in terms of classes, it was a bit trickier. So we tried to do, I think, 6 classes initially, because we used to do 6 classes in Sydney Road. So the idea was, it should be okay because we've done it before. But that first term was really rough. Basically, we only had enough people for 1 term class. So that was a little bit disappointing, but also being in a complete new space, we are close to where we used to be, but far enough that the demographics shift a little bit to the north side. It's a little bit tricky to get here. If you live in Brunswick, you do have to catch a train, where people used to be able to walk to the studio quite easily. I think the last term we did was 2022, just before Christmas, and then we haven't had any classes since then until 2023 August. So that was a really big break. So we lost a ton of momentum there. A lot of our regulars might have moved on to other studios and found something closer to home. So the first term was really rough. So the second term we got to about 3 classes, and by then I think we were still hovering about the 30-35 membership numbers. So things were definitely going in the right direction. So if you look at our graph, it basically is, growth term after term. And that's a good way to look at stuff because the term class is such a big part of our revenue. So basically, we're treating our season or the terms as like little blocks. And as long as we're growing from term to term, then I'm happy with that. The pace of the growth doesn't matter as much because I believe that the momentum will carry itself once you hit the kind of critical mass of the amount of people that know about you. So, our term class has 12 people in it for the wheel throwing, and for hand building, we do about 8 people. So for the first term, we had 12 people signed up, which is not great at all in terms of what we're used to, but it was kind of to be expected. And then we went to 3 classes, so that's 36 people. And those 36 people, some of them will talk to their friends about the classes, they'll post on social media. And then on the 3rd term, we moved on to 6 classes actually. And that was because of multiple factors. One, there were more people in the studio and there were more word of mouth, people were starting to get to know us. And also at least 3 studios I know of either stopped doing classes or had to close temporarily. So we had a lot of people who've been doing classes for a while and suddenly they lost their space and they were looking for a new space, and a lot of that influx of people came to us. So that helped build our first core group. So with 6 classes, that's 72 people. And then the 4th term, which is the current term that just started this week, we tried to do 8 classes, which kind of worked. We introduced 2 new classes. So this is the difficult part. So in terms of term classes, the most popular dates are after work. So weeknights and then weekends and then back to weekdays. So our weeknight offering, which we almost had every single night except for Friday night, there's already a term class. So those filled up pretty easily, which is always the case. People seem to be more willing to lock in a weeknight every week instead of like a Saturday night, Friday night, or Sunday, which are more high value because you want to be doing other social stuff and catch up with friends. So the weeknights are always first to sell out. We weren't able to sell out our Wednesday night class, which means we had to transfer a lot of those people into the other classes, and then we just canceled Wednesday. But what we did gain is 2 daytime class. So that's the Wednesday 10 a.m., which is a hand building class, so 8 people there. And Friday, which is happening right now actually, 10 a.m. throwing class. Initially, it wasn't selling that well, but last minute, a few people signed up. So I think the hand building class is sold out, and the Friday 10 a.m. wheel throwing class is 11 out of 12, which is, I'm happy with that. So total, I think we are now up to 77 people in our classes. So even though we lost a class and we gained a class, if you just look at the sheer number of people, we have growth slightly. So I think we get to this point about 6 to 8 class. It's going to get trickier and trickier because each time you add a class, not everyone's going to come back. So that's another thing we have to work on is our retention rate. I think our retention rate is at about 33% at the moment, but I think it can be higher. A lot of other studios I know have a much higher retention rate. I've heard from anywhere from 50% to 70%. In our old studio, our retention rate was much higher. I think it was about 67, 70%. So working on that retention, getting people to come back to the next term, it's important because it's much easier to get someone to keep going than to have a new customer. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that before in terms of the business side of thing and finding customers and clients. One other thing is a lot of people from term class, once they've done 2 or 3 terms, they feel more comfortable in the studio, they want more flexibility. So instead of doing other term class, which even though we include extra time, so you can come in for your 2.5-hour class once a week, and then you can also come in for an extra day outside of that class to practice, to produce. So signing up to a term class is actually like a mini membership where you get to spend a bit of flexible time in the studio as well. But some people want more of that, and they also just want to be able to practice more and not have to come in a specific time. They would transfer and kind of become a member. So our kind of customer flow, sometimes we do lose term class people, but that's because they've become a different side of the business, which is the membership side. So that's a good thing for us because members tend to stay for longer. Once you're settled in the space, once you have the routine of coming in 2 or 3 times a week, you've got your own kind of storage and workflow sorted, you're more likely to stay for a longer period of time than continuing doing term class, because term class is also a larger lump sum. So our term class is $560, which is on the cheaper side compared to most other studio, but it's still a fair amount of money to pay upfront. Where membership is $290, and then it's a monthly subscription, so it's a little bit more spread out. But one way we're kind of counteracting that, or kind of making it easier for people to sign into term class, is I've built a payment plan system where you can split your payment into 4 intervals. It can be weekly, monthly, depending on how far away you are to the start of the class. We'll trial for a few terms and see how that goes, but I think that will help a lot of people, especially nowadays, to pay like $150 fortnight or something like that. I think that'll be a lot more manageable. So we'll see how that changes the term class. I think a lot of the feedback we've gotten from people who are doing the term class is that it's finance, really. If they can afford it, they'll be more than happy to come back. And obviously, with the economy and the time that it is right now, totally understand that this is not a high priority purchase. If you have to save money, this is probably one of the first things you give up. And I think from next term, we'll start again, release more time slot, try and fill as many spots as we can. Not every class needs to be sold out, but every class needs to hit the break-even point. So I think anything that are half full or above will run, because then we're still, even if we're just making a little bit of money, or if we're just breaking even with that class, just having people in the studio, having them talk about us, is still worth it in terms of the marketing point of view. And that also allows us to do makeup classes a lot easier, because we've got empty spots in classes where people can sign into. Which kind of brings me to the point. One of the biggest thing that we've done to change the business is we've automated almost every aspect of the logistics side of things. So any admins in terms of people being away and having to make up a class, we used to do that through emails, and it's really messy because people will email and be like, oh, is there any class I can do a makeup class today? And then we have to rely on people to tell us that they're going to be away, so that we know in advance that there's a spot, and then we can put people into it. And it's a nightmare, and it means most people, once they miss out on the class, they won't get to make up for it. So the new system, which is just one functionality of the entire website that I've built, is that students can mark their own absentees, which then gives them a makeup credit. And with that makeup credit, they can then look at a list of classes with available spots and then book themselves into it. That has been the biggest time saver, which means I only have to hire staff to do the physical things that we can't automate. We obviously still have people that check the emails and do a lot of that stuff, but there's a lot of automation happening in the back end that I'll dive into a little bit more as well. But just to quickly talk about the membership. So in terms of membership number, just before I go back into the automation side of things, we're at about 53, plus or minus 2 to 3. So it changes every month. People come, people go. But the general trend has been upwards. So starting at 20 something to 30 to 40 to 50, we've slowly grew that membership. But our studio still doesn't feel busy at all. Most of the time, there's only at most 6 or 7 members here at the same time. What happens is, because of the 24-hour access, you've got people with different life schedule, different work schedule, all coming at different times. So we don't actually have one peak hour. Maybe after work, from 6 till 9 seems to be a little bit busier. So that's when we will get maybe 6, 7 people here at the same time. But during the morning, during the day, often it's just 2 to 3 people. So that's been working well. So I think our capacity can go, we imagine about 100 is the kind of hard limit that I'll set, but we're going to stop at about 75 just to monitor things, so we don't oversell or overbook the studio and then suddenly everyone's kind of suffering because they're not getting the same resources as they used to. But okay, so going back to automation, the website is basically something that I've spent the last 2 years building. As soon as the expansion project was kind of conceptualized, initially I just wanted to build a system to track our firing service, because that was one of the downsides in the old studios, is I want to make sure that people are aware when their work is ready for collection. So we used to keep track of every order. We write it on a clipboard, and then once it's fired, we check it off. And people that would then get individual emails typed and sent to them, or just saying, this is ready for collection, just drop by whenever you want to pick things up. And it was good because then people don't have to come in and guess when things are ready, but it's a lot of admin work. So what we've done now, if you have seen our Instagram firing surface, you will notice that we use something called a token. Each token has a number on it, and when you place your order for firing surface, you put your token with your work. So when we then load the kiln, we collect all the token that's gone into the kiln, or all the order that's gone into the kiln, and collect the token that's assigned to them. And then on our website, we can then enter the token numbers into the kiln. So each kiln has its own web page, basically. And once that's entered into the page, we click load, and everyone that belongs to those tokens will get an email saying this specific order is now in the kiln. When we unload it, same thing happens, but we just click unload. We don't have to enter the tokens anymore because that's saved into the database. And when that gets clicked, people get their collection email. So each individual email will have the order number of that token. They can click the order number to see specifically which order it is, including an image. So you can just quickly reference what you've put in through our system. And people come in, grab the stuff, and it's such a great process because we don't have to manually do anything other than entering some token numbers, which literally takes 2 minutes, if any. If there's a lot of tokens, it could take a little bit longer. But another thing it helps is that because when you put in an order, you have to choose your temperature. So bisque, earthenware, mid-fire, stoneware, oxidation, stoneware reduction. If we find a token that doesn't match what we're loading, so if I'm loading a kiln that's mid-fire and then one order was misplaced, so we've got different trolleys for each temperature. If you place the thing on the wrong one, when I enter that token on the website, it will actually give me an error telling me that this order has the wrong temperature or it's not compatible with what the kiln is set to. So now I know, okay, there's an issue there. So did they, one, choose the wrong temperature on the website, or two, just misplaced it on the wrong trolley? But because of that, we can pick things up where if there was human error at some point, we can put that aside and we've got the image to reference. So even if we accidentally loaded the kiln already, we can then look at that order, check the image, and make sure that we take out all the work and then clarify with the customer to make sure, okay, was this actually mid-fire or was this stoneware or whatever? That way we don't accidentally fire things incorrectly, especially things like earthenware going to a stoneware firing, which is going to melt and destroy a bunch of work and kiln shelf. So that automation has saved a lot of time as well. So our classes is also managed by that. The waitlist system, let's say you sign up to the workshop waitlist on term 1. So you couldn't get into it, that's fine. Term 2, everyone came back and there was no more spots, or there's people in front of you that have joined the waitlist before you, they got the spot and you didn't. When that happens, when the next term rolls around, that list is maintained. So in term 3, it's a lot more likely for you to get the spot because it's an ongoing waitlist. And each time slot of each class has its own individual waitlist, so you're only joining the ones that you want to get into, instead of just being a general waitlist and then we have to email and be like, oh, do you want this class? This is open up. No, you actually can't do Saturday. Okay, and then next person, and the next person, and the next person. It's hard for me to describe how important the website is to this business, because without, if we were doing this thing the old way, we would need at least 1 extra full-time staff just to manage all that stuff. And it's not a fun job. It's annoying, it's tedious, and if the computer can do it better, we'll just spend some time, learn how to make the app and build it. Another thing is physical supply. So let's say you're a member and our reclaim is included, our reclaim clay, but you want something, a specific look, you want something to all match. If you're making 20 of the same thing, you might want to, be a bit more picky about what clay you're using. In that case, we've got commercial clay that you can buy, and instead of having staff here all the time, because you might be here after hours and there's no staff here to do the transaction, we've got little QR codes set up so you can scan the QR code, pay online, grab your bag of clay and just go straight into work. So we do that for clay, for tools, for drinks in the fridge as well. And again, that just means less work for us. So we've basically outsourced a lot of the logistic stuff to the website and also to customer. That's why the self-service firing system is great, because we don't actually have to interact. Not that we don't want to interact with our customer, but if you have to manage every transaction, it's going to be so tedious. And as of today, we've done over 4,000 transactions on the website. So that includes booking to class, firing surface, supplies, anything that basically money flow through, a transaction is created, and as of today, there's about 4,000 of them. So imagine if even half of them require intervene from a human being, that's a lot of work, and this hasn't even been a full year yet. We're gonna move on. What's next? I guess I can talk about the revenue stream. So our main income is term class, which I would estimate it's about 50% of our revenue is from classes and workshops. Membership probably is responsible for about 25%. And then the other 25% will be a mix of firing surface, which is a decent amount. Also our tool sales, so our bat system, our 3D printed boxes, clay supplies, and things like that. That will kind of be the rest of it. And this is also why I want to focus on YouTube, because of additional revenue that's also not limited by our space, and it's something different. It's a lot more scalable. So I think classes at some point is going to hit its limit, because there's only so many hours of the day you can do classes. And same as membership, once we run out of space, we run out of space. So having the kind of media / content creation side project ongoing, it's not going to do anything for the next 3-4 years, but if it can gain momentum, if there's a decent following, things like sponsorship, ad money, things like that will be beneficial for the business as well. I guess when you're doing a small business like this, you're always trying to find ways to increase your revenue stream. We're going to hit a wall at some point, I would say within the next 2-3 years, and once that happens, you can either have another studio, which is a lot of work, and I don't actually know if I'm going to enjoy starting a second location. And then in terms of the other side of the finance, so you've got your revenue, then obviously you've got your expenses, tax, GST, all that stuff. At the moment, the biggest cost that we've got is rent and salary. So our rent is twice as much as what we used to pay, which is actually not that bad given how much we've gained from having this bigger space. But it is substantial amount, and also salary. Salary is our biggest cost of all. It's the most expensive thing we've got on our expense list, and I don't think that's a bad thing. So if we can afford to have a larger team, a larger staff, or pay people better, I'm all for it. I think right now, in terms of the human resource that we have, we're probably slightly over our demand, as in we're not constantly running out of time to do our work. I think the studio is being maintained in a very good way. I think the members in class do a decent job with cleaning up after themselves, and we can just do a bit of touching up, clean a few things, spot clean here and there, maintain our studio, the wheels, the firing surface, the kilns are constantly being fired. So that's one of the main kind of tasks that's required from our studio techs. And obviously for classes, we have teachers, which I'm more than happy to pay, because you only pay those salaries if you have a class that you're running, which means you're making money. So the more teachers there are, it means that we're running more classes, then there's no reason why that's an issue. I would like to at some point increase our base salary for most people, but in the first year, it's a little bit tricky to do that, because we do want to retain our staff. Like, we have a great team, and it's something that makes or breaks a business like this, where even though there's a lot of self-service thing, when you come to the studio, your main point of contact is our studio techs, our staff, and you want to make sure that your staff is happy, because then they do a better job. They have in a better mood, they're able to communicate better. And then I'd rather we focus on that than my own salary. Like right now, so I haven't paid myself much. I take out maybe 1,000 or 2,000 a month here and there just when I need to. I'm kind of approaching this a little bit more conservative than I feel like I need to, but I basically want, it's similar to personal finance. I basically want an emergency fund. So if we get 2 or 3 terms in a row where we're just not selling classes for whatever reason, people are just not coming back, and we just don't have the same revenue, we'll still survive for a decent amount of time. So about 3 to 6 months of emergency fund, if things are really bad, is what I'm aiming for. Once we've hit that mark, I'm gonna then reinvest a lot of that money from like above that back into the business, to most likely advertising, marketing, advertising, having a staff to manage social media, for example. And if we require a little bit more help with content creation like this, in the forms of editors, and mostly editors, and just management and marketing, all that stuff. So basically scaling things that are not making us direct return, but it's good for the brand in the long term. So same thing. So again, with the content creation, you're not going to see a return right away, but the benefit of it is once it snowballs, it can get much bigger. So now that the business is running a bit smoother, the team does 80% of the work. I kind of focus on the bigger picture stuff, which is exactly how I want. I can save a lot of money, or in fact, I can pay myself a decent amount of money if I take over a lot of the classes, a lot of the studio tech work. I can do all that and then keep all that salary, and I can make a decent living, and that would be fine. But that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is have a business that runs itself, and I can focus on expanding the business. As one saying is like, you want to work on your business and not in your business, because if you're working in your business, you can't do much growth, you can't focus on the big picture stuff, and you're stuck just maintaining the same level. I guess my style of approaching business is that it's not like I want to make a lot of money so I can have a lot of money. A lot of times I want to make more money in the business so that we can do more in the business. So expanding that into making tools, making online content, having like artist talk, and there's a gallery, having an online market space. That's another other thing that we want to do, is so people can sell their ceramics on through our website, mainly our members and staff, and just having one marketplace that people can browse and see stuff, and they can use us as the after service care. We can do the packaging, the shipping, and things like that. And you just have to take your own photo and list your stuff, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of that stuff we can't do unless we have the resource for it. And to get those resources, we have to make more money. So as the business makes more money, we can also do other things that doesn't make us money because we have the resource to fund those things. So stuff that if we want to do, cheap kind of gallery showings, we want to support local artists, we want to support our community, give away free classes, we want to give away free membership to people who can't normally afford to do these things. We can't do that unless we're making enough money to cover our own expenses, grow the business, and also do that stuff. I think the mindset is quite interesting. It's different if you are working for yourself. I think a lot of the motivation now to build the business is not to make more money for myself. Again, it's just, we've got staff, we've got team. I want to be able to pay people more. And I think that has kind of overtaken the personal gain because there's so much of it, because you want to, like I said, give to the community, you want to do all that stuff, you want to do really cool things that are not about making money. You want to pay your staff well, you want people to have a good future. And all that combined, at the moment, is probably a bigger motivation than me making more money every year, if that makes sense. Obviously, I still want to build the business so that it can support my life. It can, pay the bills, the mortgage, do all that, and then still have money to enjoy life. But it's not about building an empire. And as much as I would enjoy that process of having a business empire and having multiple things that are, it's interesting, it's fun, but not because of the money side of thing. And I don't know, some people might not believe me, but I feel like off the top of my head, that's kind of the approach, really. Just make money so you can do cool shit, really. And for other people, like do cool shit that other people can benefit from. I think that's about it for this month. I think, yeah, we'll do monthly updates. Obviously, the next ones from now won't be as long because there's much less to cover, but it'll be cool just to talk about general stuff and I can ramble on like I always do. So yeah, so I don't know how many people have made it this far, but if you do, I'll see you next month in terms of the business update. There are a few things in the works that are quite interesting, but I think next month will be a better time to talk about it because then they'll have more to show basically. Right now, a lot of it is just concepts. So see you then.